Hello and welcome. This is L.A. Rathbone, going to make a relatively short video for you all called Web Development from a non-web developer's perspective. Now, I had to do some very light web development recently for a home office of mine, and whenever I peer into the world of web development, I'm inundated with things like frameworks like jQuery and Node.js and React and all these Ruby on Rails, all these crazy things. But I like to understand things from a sort of a lower level perspective of what's actually happening behind the scenes. And so I'm going to show you kind of as somebody who loves to program non-web applications, how one might perceive web development. So let's go back to sort of, and this is going to be very stripped down, but fundamental basics of how the web talks from server to client and vice versa. So we use the HTTP protocol. You've probably heard of it. And HTTP protocol consists of something called requests. Now, there's a whole whack of different types of requests, but for the purpose of this video, we're just going to focus on two. There's GET and POST. Now, the literature tells you that GET is typically used for to retrieve a certain information from a server, and it should not modify that data, and that's probably true. And POST is supposedly for updating data and may be used to modify data that's on the server. But getting down to brass tacks, what it really is with GET requests, the data itself is all that forms part of the HTTP request is all baked into the URL. So, for example, Google.com, that's a GET request. Google.com $Q is equal to all kinds of crap. That's also a GET request, but it includes parameters, and it's these parameters that we're going to be quite interested in. Now, POST, on the other hand, the data is not baked into the URL, but it's sent behind the scenes. And in fact, you've probably seen an error occur sometimes if you try to refresh a page. It'll say, hey, are you sure you want to resubmit this form information? And the reason for that is because there was a POST request made where the data is being sent behind the scenes, and what's being asked of you is, do you really want to resubmit this data, which may have already been submitted already? Now, how do you send and receive these HTTP requests and process them? Well, you're doing it all the time when you're using your web browser. Your web browser is just doing it. But on the server side, how do you actually respond to them? Well, I'm using the Apache web server, and you're probably very familiar with the web server just serving static files. So, for example, I'm going to go to a test form right here. When I go to this URL and hit enter, I've made a GET request. The server is just serving a flat file to the client. When I view page source, what I have is I have a form here, and I've also got that form right here. This is the actual file opened on the server in Vim. So a GET request is made to actually get this form. Okay. But the main way in which you make POST and GET requests that have parameters in them that we're going to be concerned with here is through forms. And when you use an HTML form, it will send either a GET or POST request to the server. And all you need to do to specify that is in the method attribute, you'll change it to POST or GET, depending on what you want to do. Now, on the server side, you can either have a framework, like we talked about, or you can have PHP, for example, that will basically be taking these. You'll have an instance running on your server, be it Apache, Nginx, or its own thing, and it will have its own way of taking these HTTP requests and handling them. But there's something called CGI, which is the Common Gateway Interface, which is it's a standardized way for any language, any script, any program to take POST or GET parameters and to make use of them. And so here's how this works. So we just talked about a flat file being just served to the client. So essentially when we go to form.html here, test/form.html on this web server, the server is basically just catting this HTML file as part of a response to the GET request to get this document. And it's just basically catting it out via to the client. CGI, instead of just accessing the file itself, the server is told to execute the file, and the standard output that is output from that file is utilized as the response to the HTTP request. So that's the difference, and that's very powerful, actually. It can be dangerous too in ways that we'll see later on, but it's very powerful. Now, how do we actually tap into this common gateway interface? So I'm using the Apache web server like I mentioned. I'm not going to tell you how to set up the Apache server, but Apache knows how to speak CGI. And if you set it up in the standardized way that I have, if you go to, if you put scripts in scripts or programs in a special folder called CGI bin, then it will know to talk to them in the CGI-ish way. Now, what is the CGI-ish way? Well, it sends a bunch of items to the script or the program. Now, first of all, it sends a series of environment variables, and if you go to this IBM web page, it will show you the whole list of them. We're not going to be concerned with all of them. We're mostly going to be concerned with the request method, which will tell us if it's post or get, the query string, which if it is a GET request, the query parameters will be plopped into that environment variable. But if it's a POST request, then instead of plopping into the query string environment variable, it will put those query parameters in standard input to your script or program. So, I mean, there's a lot more to it. Like I said, there's all this stuff here that you can tap into if you like, but we really only need to know a few elements of what CGI is to start using it. So let's go back to our form. So what I've actually done here, and if you know HTML, great. I'm not an HTML expert. I just know the basics. But even if you don't know HTML, you should be able to follow along. It's relatively straightforward. We have a form here. Like I said already, you tell it whether you want to use the post or get method. But then you have to include what's called an action parameter, or an action attribute, which is where do you want this form data to be sent to. So we're gonna actually start out by doing something kind of dumb, which is we're gonna send it right back to the HTML file itself, which is just a flat file. So you can probably, thinking ahead, think to yourself, that's not really gonna work very well. But let's go ahead and give it a try. So we have an input. It's a text type of input, and you'll know it has the name is equal to data and ID is equal to data, and then we have a submit, and that's all we have. So just make a mental note of that. So if we just put foobar in there, we're going to click submit, and now you'll note that we just went right back to our form. It's blank again. But if you look here, the browser has actually formulated a GET request, and you know that it's a GET request because it's baked into the URL, and it's got the question mark data is equal to foobar. We can't do anything with it because the server isn't executing any CGI script. It's just recycling the flat file again. It's not utilizing that data in any way, but there it is. You see that it's been formulated for us in the URL bar, and if we do something with spaces in it, for example, you're going to see those spaces have been replaced with plus signs. Again, make a mental note of some of these things. It's going to be important soon. So what if we actually wanted to now take that information using some of this knowledge over here that we have? So we're going to start out with a C program. Let's take a look at that C program. It is located, the source rather, is located in this folder, process, no, what's it called again? Env. Test end? Oh my gosh, I don't remember what it's called. Oh, that's right, CGI env. .c, okay. So, let's go to the top. We've included our header files, including strings.h, not to be confused with string.h, which is a POSIX header. And we're going to create an enumeration just to be able to categorize requests as to whether they're unknown, post, or get. And then we're going to initialize this variable here. We're going to grab the environment variable contents of the request method via getEnv. And because, like I said, because we are pumping out standard output that the browser needs to understand, HTTP has something called a header, which we're going to print using printf, which has the content type. It's pretty much always required. And once the headers are done, you put \r, \n, \r, \n. And you may find that you could just do \n twice, and that will work in most instances, but the standard says that you should use \r, \n. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. And we're going to send plain text, not HTML just yet, back to the client. So we find out what type of request it is. We use a case insensitive oh my gosh, string comparison. And if it's post, capitalized or not, we categorize it as a post request, and if it's get, we categorize it as a get request, and then we go through the motions here of saying, well, if it's a get request, just print out the query string. Again, where's the query string come from? Like I said before, in CGI, it's standard that if it is a get request, it's pumped into the query string environment variable, so we print that out here. And if it is a post request, it's done via standard input, so we simply spit that standard input back out. That's it, pretty straightforward. So I've compiled that, and I've put it on my server in the CGI bin folder. So let's replace this action now with that actual program. CGI bin / CGI-env, and there's no extension. It's just compiled to an executable called CGI-env, and it is in that folder, okay, on the web server. So let's save that, and if we go back to our form now, I'm gonna actually just delete this get information here and go right back to it, because I want to make sure that we're actually getting the refreshed version of the page, not like a cached copy. That's correct. It's going to send the data to CGI-env. So we're going to enter the same information again. And now you see here that we've received our plain text response back from the HTTP server. And it's just saying query string data is equal to all this stuff here. Now if we go back to the HTML file, and if we change this to post, and then we go back to the form, and let's just refresh it to make sure that it is getting the most up-to-date version. Yes, it is. Let's put something else in there just to make things interesting. Foo bar baz. Click submit. And now you see here it knows that it's a post request, and you see there's nothing baked into the URL now. It's just showing CGI-env, which is the name of the program. And then the post data from standard input is being sent via plain text as we expected it to right here. Now now that you know this, you can basically do anything you like. Create any kind of web application that you like that takes input from a user, and you have full access to anything that you want on your server. But you'll note that there's a couple of inconveniences here, which first of all, the way that these query strings are given to you in the raw format, you've got the equal sign here. You can think of these as a key and value pair, but then you got plus signs instead of a space. And if we actually put some special characters in here, you're going to see it's all gobbledygook, right? So we would need to create our own subroutines to parse all this information. And believe me, this code has been written already by other people, and better than we could probably do. So now that we understand those fundamental basics, let's move off C and let's move to a higher level language. The higher level language that we are going to use is Perl. So let me open up, let me close this. I'm going to open up a Perl script that I have. var dub CGI bin processform.pl. Okay, so you see here we have a basic Perl script. It's going to use strict warnings in version 5.14, which is about 10 years old now. We're going to use a module called CGI.pm. Now, this used to come with Perl a long time ago. It does not anymore. So if it doesn't come with Perl on your distribution, you may need to install it either via your distribution's package management software or through CPAN. It's considered by some to be deprecated, but it still works really well. It's classic, it's stable, it's solid as a rock, it's going to do what you want it to do. So what we do is we create a CGI object, and we're going to call it Q for query. That's the variable name that the documentation uses, so we're just going to go ahead and do that. And instead of manually pumping out our header, there's a subroutine. There's a subroutine that comes with the CGI module that just lets us do that. And if you don't give it any optional parameters, it will just give you a standard actual HTML header. So then what you can start doing is you can just start spitting out HTML, and it will work. So we're going to skip this line right here for now. We're going to show you a here doc that's going to just give a really basic HTML page. It's going to spit that back out to the client. But we have this variable here called data is equal to, and we use the param method of the CGI module, which will take that key. So you recall name is equal to data, that's where that will come from, and it will just give you the value of that, and it will have the spaces and the special characters already parsed out for you, which is pretty nice. So if we go back now, first of all, let's make sure that we actually change the action to be CGI bin/process form.pl. You don't have to put the PL on there, by the way. The server will know. The server will simply execute what you have. And because of the shebang line, we already know it's a Perl script. You don't need an extension at all. But it is pretty standard to suffix Perl scripts with the PL extension. So we're just going to do that out of standard practice. Let's go back to our form now. Let's refresh it. Let's check the source to make sure that it got updated correctly. Yes, it did. Now let's say foo, submit, and we now have an HTML page. And if you view source, you're not going to see the Perl script. You're just going to see the actual HTML that was spat out by the server. And you see here that the parameter that we entered in has now been generated into HTML page on the fly, which is way cool. You'll note that there's nothing in the URL. That's because we did not change this from post to get. Let's actually change that back to get. Let's save it. Let's go back, refresh. Now let's enter some new, let's put spaces in it this time, hit enter. And you're going to see now it is baked into the URL because it's a get request. The pluses in here have been converted for you into spaces, as you might expect. So note that we didn't have to change the Perl script at all. The way that the CGI module works, it will simply auto-detect whether you're using post or get, and will just handle it for you regardless of the situation. You can still technically find out if it's post or get. Don't worry if you want to. But if you don't care, then the Perl module will just handle that for you. But there's a problem with this. And let me show you what that problem is. So it seems really nice. You can just put whatever you like in there and it will be processed for you. But what if we say this, H1, welcome to my cool website, and then paragraph, please enter your credit card information. If we go submit, we've basically allowed somebody to use what's called XSS, and the HTML that was piped into us has simply been actually entered into this website on the fly. And so this is actually a pretty big vulnerability. People could access your server and just use it to make phishing websites and things like that. We don't want people to be able to do that. So how do we work around that? Well, the CGI module has a method as well called escape HTML. So if we use that and just call that on the param return value that we have, and if we go back now, notice that we don't have to do anything special. We've changed the Perl script. It's just going to work now. And if we re-enter this information, I just resubmitted the GET request. I didn't go back to doing it through the form again. Now you see that the HTML has been escaped And if you go to the view page source, it's going to have all these guys here, which is going to show literally the open and close angle brackets rather than just injecting HTML in. So that's something that is very important to make a note of if you're going to use this module. That's a bit of a wart. You might want it to always do that. So what you could go ahead and do is create your own subroutine that just creates a wrapper around that for you. So let's just do that actually right now. Actually let's call it, get param. And we're going to say my param is equal to shift, return, q, escape HTML on q, param, and then param. And we're going to do is put scalar in here because of the way in which we're running it now, it might think that because the CGI module actually allows you to run items in scalar or in list context, and that's a bit of a wart. You kind of don't really want it to be run in list context, but for backwards compatibility it does sometimes. And so if it thinks that there's some inkling of you running it in list context, it's going to pipe a warning out, and that's going to just clog your logs. So I'm just sticking the scalar guy in here just to clean that up. Don't worry too much about that. I mean, that's just this is just an example to illustrate a quick point. So let's just go get param, and it's going to be data, I believe. So let's see if this works. Still works fine, right? So that's just, creates a little less work when we make a wrapper function to do that. So that's pretty cool. And now you can kind of understand how you can use this methodology to create any kind of web application that you like. You could access a database. You could access a flat file that's outside of the reach of where the client would usually be able to go on the server. As long as you're able to take the data that's given to you and spit HTML back out, you're golden. So what if we have more than one parameter on the form? So let's change this, and let's instead of data, let's make it first name. Let's have first name, and let's have keep that as text, but make it first name, and ID first name, and let's make a last name as well. Oops. There we go, should work. Just to look at the form for a second, we'll go back, let's refresh it. Doesn't look very pretty. I guess what we could do is do BR. There. Also, let's I'm just an HTML expert, as you can see, just using really modern, wonderful HTML. There we go. Looks a little better. So there we go. Now on the client side, folks can input a first name and a last name. So instead of doing this here, let's go ahead and say first name is equal to get param first name, and then last name, and instead of saying this, we'll say P, your first name is strong first name. Last name should work. Let's see. So let's go first name Logan, last name Rathbone, submit. There you go. So you can do whatever you like. And notice that if you look at the get data here, the way that it separates in a query string is it puts an ampersand. First name equals Logan ampersand, last name equals Rathbone. And if you wanted to use our old C program just to see the raw data, you could change that back to CGI env. And let's go back, actually. We need to refresh this, I think. Let's do it again. And now you see we can actually just get that raw data here if you want to see what the query string looks like in a raw format. So there you go. So there you have it. That's the basics of web development from a non-web developer's perspective. Now that you know this, you can use any language you like. You can do anything that you like and create any type of application that you want. This is really the fundamental basics of how this all works. You take input and you spit output out. That's basically all that it is. You notice that there's no JavaScript required at all. You can certainly add some JavaScript in to spice things up a bit if you like, but that's the basics of how this stuff works. So there you go. Hope you found that interesting. And that's all I have for now. This is Ellie Rathbone signing off. Good night and good luck.